Welcome back. This is Chapter 28A, Part 3, Implantation. Embryonic development continues as the embryo travels through the uterine tube to the uterus, where it floats freely until it implants. Significant events in this process include cleavage, blastocyst formation, and implantation. Cleavage occurs when the zygote moves towards the uterus. Rapid mitotic divisions of the zygote occurs and produces cells with high surface-to-volume ratio that enhances the uptake of nutrients and oxygen and the disposal of wastes. The first cleavage occurs at about 36 hours and produces two daughter cells called blastomeres, which then continue to divide. After 72 hours, clusters of cells containing 16 or more cells are referred to as a morula. Around day 4 or 5, the embryo, which consists of about 100 cells and is now referred to as a blastocyst, reaches the uterus. The blastocyst is fluid-filled and a hollow sphere, and it's composed of trophoblast cells, which display immunosuppressive factors and participate in placenta formation. The inner cell mass is a cluster of 20 to 30 rounded cells. This becomes the embryonic disc, which will form the embryo and 3 to 4 extraembryonic membranes. The fourth extraembryonic membrane, called the chorion, is formed by the trophoblast. Figure 28.3 shows cleavage from the zygote to the blastocyst. So here we have the ovulation of the oocyte, and it continues down, or it gets swept into the uterine tube. Fertilization occurs within the uterine tube, and a zygote is produced. The zygote goes through divisions, and in 2 days, it is at the 4-cell stage. So it has 4 cells. It continues to go through more cell divisions. In about 3 days, it's a solid ball of blastomeres called the morula. It continues moving towards the actual uterus, and in doing so, the early blastocyst is formed at about 4 days. Here we can see a hollowed, fluid-filled cavity that hatches from the zona pellucida. Okay, and this is the degenerating zona pellucida. And this again is called the blastocyst. The blastocyst will implant on the side of the uterus. The implanting blastocyst is a sphere of trophoblast cells and an eccentric cell cluster called the inner cell mass. This occurs around day 7. So here it's called, this is a trophoblast, the blastocyst cavity, and the inner mass, or inner cell mass. The blastocyst floats around for about 2 to 3 days, and it's nourished by the uterine secretions. Implantation begins 6 to 7 days after ovulation. The trophoblast cells adhere to the site where proper receptors and chemical signals are found. Inflammatory-like response occurs in the endometrium. The uterine blood vessels become more permeable and leaky, and inflammatory cells invade the area. Here we see the trophoblast implanting on the uterine endometrial epithelium. Okay, this whole area is the endometrium. This is the trophoblast, this is the blastocyst cavity, and these are the inner cell mass. The trophoblast cells proliferate and form 2 distinct layers. The first is the Cytotrophoblast, or the cellular trophoblast. This is the inner layer of cells. So you can see that here, right at the implantation site. Then there's the syncytial trophoblast, or the syncytial trophoblast. And this is found right here. You can see how it's into the endometrium. These are the cells in the outer layer, and they lose the plasma membranes and become a multinuclear mass. This sends out long protrusions that continue to invade and digest the endometrium. Okay. As the endometrium is eroded, the blastocyst burrows into the lining, surrounding itself by a pool of leaked blood. This is a very cool picture or a slide of this. The endometrial cells then cover and seal off the implanted blastocyst. So we have the Cytotrophoblast, that one layer of cells. Then we have the syncytial trophoblast. Implantation is usually completed by day 12 after ovulation, so that would be day 26 of the menstrual cycle. This would be about the same time that menstruation would occur. The corpus luteum is maintained by HCG to prevent menstruation. HCG is human chorionic gonadotropin. It is secreted by the trophoblast cells and later the chorion. It prompts the corpus luteum to continue secretion of progesterone and estrogen. It also promotes placental development via its autocrine growth factor activity. HCG levels rise until the end of month 2. There's a decline as the placenta begins to secrete progesterone and estrogen. Low values occur at 4 months and will continue at low for the rest of the pregnancy. In cases where implantation fails to occur, the uterus becomes non-receptive again. About 2/3 of all zygotes formed fail to implant by the end of the first week, or they spontaneously abort. An estimated 30% of implanted embryos later miscarry because of genetic defects of the embryo, uterine malformation, or other unknown problems. Figure 28.5 shows the hormonal changes during pregnancy. At day 0 of gestation, this is when, that's when ovulation, okay, I'm sorry, this is at gestational weeks, so that's before anything has even occurred. So at day 3, there's ovulation and fertilization. Progesterone and estrogen have already started to increase. The HCG has a huge spike all the way up to here, and then it starts to decrease while the estrogens and progesterones then will maintain everything. And then the HCG continues to be low until birth.